knowing that you'll respect them in the morning with intelligent talk that stimulates.
Welcome back to our Picking Up the Pieces segment, and this is an important kind of a pre-election view of the show. Glad that you are with us, Frank Vernuccio, Ben Brunson, myself, Guy Wehman, and big tech and all. And it seems like we have the Epstein effect here with Hunter Biden. And Ben, I'm going to let you take it. Go.
Well, what's happening on the big tech side is really disturbing. I am an economic libertarian. I'm a free market guy. So I always have a bias towards a private company having the ability to do what they want to do. But the bias is so overwhelming. It's so lopsided. And you have to recognize that Twitter and Facebook and these platforms and certainly Google have become the public square at this point, the method of the dissemination of information, especially in an age when the mainstream media is thoroughly corrupted and thoroughly biased and completely in the tank for one party versus another. You're left with communications happening through these big platforms, these big social media platforms, and they are not a fair platform. They are not fair arbiters. And there has to be something done to make them, hopefully to bring these platforms into a compliance where they are free and fair trading of ideas. Of course, none of these platforms had any problem with the Russian hoax, which continues to this day with made up quotes by the president about veterans, which are floated around daily. The Fine People hoax, which is floated around daily, that goes on incessantly without any problem. Frankly, I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem when they throttle and turn off real stories or hoaxes, for that matter, that are anti-democratic party. These ideas ought to be freely exchanged. To me, the bright line that ought to exist is if you're declared a terrorist under U.S. law, then you lose your space on these platforms.
All right, Frank, it's your turn to respond.
Well, like Ben, I consider myself an economic libertarian. A couple of years ago, though, I wrote an article for the Washington Times, which dealt with this whole issue of social media censorship. And I suggested that platforms like Google, Twitter, and Facebook be considered the equivalent of common carriers like airlines or railroads. Now, I don't believe that the government should be telling Twitter or Facebook or Google what to do, what to keep, and what not to keep, but they should be treated as a common carrier, that if you want to print the most salacious gossip about somebody, about a politician, you have the right to do it as long as you treat everyone fairly. What happens in Twitter and Facebook, and especially Google, which is the most important of all in my belief, is that they censor out the different point of view, the more conservative or centrist point of view. So what you really have is that the major means of information that most Americans rely on is basically nothing more than sound bites for the hard left. Students use Google to do their research. This is what they know of the world. This is what they know of news. When Google acts as a censor, when they say that you cannot, if you're a centrist or a conservative, have your information ranked anywhere near in their opening pages, when Facebook and Twitter censor out anything other than hard left democratic points of view, that is devastating to this country. And there has to be an understanding that, like a common carrier, that just as you can't go be told by an airline that, well, we don't like that show you're doing on Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, so you can't fly with us today. You can't ride our railroad. The same thing with Twitter and Facebook and Google. They can't keep you out simply because you don't buy their left-wing views.
But you know, Frank, you can get a ride on a tractor because we like farmers.
Well said. And by the way, the latest polls indicate that farming areas are going solidly for President Trump, despite a concerted effort by the Democrats to win over some votes in those areas.
Okay, final thought here, Ben.
Well, that common carrier analogy is a perfect one, because who can't fly on a common carrier goes right back to my point. If you're on a terror watch list, you can't fly on a common carrier or board a train. And to me, that is the clear line. You're letting the government use a standard which about 95% of the country will agree to. And that seems to me a fair way to do it. So I love Frank's idea. That is the right approach philosophically. You would think that the FCC has the power to essentially bring that about through regulatory process. And yet we continue to see this type of clear bias among these leading social platforms. And it's a real problem. At this point, it is definitely fall into the realm of clear interference in the election of the type that's real, unlike the Russia hoax.
All right, we're going to take a timeout. We're going to be back with our hot button topics, but yet on YouTube, you've got to check us out because there's going to be a 6th segment that we're going to do there, and we're going to expound on some of these ideas, and that's something that the affiliates won't be able to carry because it's past the time frame. But look us up at WBV Inside the News on YouTube. We're going to take a timeout. We'll be back. Frank, off the air, you brought up, I thought was a very key line. The Keystone State, Pennsylvania, a key state. Oh.
Yeah, you're going to see in the post-election analysis a lot of attention paid to the city of Philadelphia. We all know that Pennsylvania is playing a key role in getting electoral votes for either candidate in this election. But we know that Philadelphia has consistently been a hotbed of voter fraud. J. Christian Adams, a former civil rights attorney with the Department of Justice, often pointed out that the voter fraud that he saw in Philadelphia was worse than anything the Department of Justice ever experienced before. Ben brought up off camera, and I'm going to steal his thunder a little bit here, that there are precincts in Philadelphia where 120% of the voters vote 100% Democrat. You're going to see that extensively. One of the reasons the Democrats have been so vehement in their pursuit of ballot harvesting and destroying any kind of voting integrity has because they are concerned that without that cheating that they have done, that they might lose in states like Pennsylvania. And I'm going to say also, New York and California could possibly be on the line as well. We know that in California, for example, in Orange County, one incumbent Republican, lost his seat several years ago when there was 120% or so of the voters voted, and that extra 20%, even assuming that 100% of the people voted, which of course is nonsense, all voted for the Democrat candidate. So you're going to see voter fraud writ large across the country, and it's going to be one of the factors why November and December are going to be such violent months throughout the United States, as the Department of Justice will investigate these cases, and in retaliation for that investigation, the left will conduct violent protests.
Out in California, there was a bin, a huge bin, looked like one of these dumpsters, but it said vote ballot box, and someone lit it on fire, Ben.
Yeah, so these ballot boxes that are out in the public, like mailboxes, ballot repositories, unfortunately that made the news because that may spark a wave of arson attacks against ballot boxes. But I think Frank's points are dead on, and it is highly conceivable, if not probable, that this election could turn on what happens in a city like Philadelphia, because Pennsylvania may be the deciding state. You don't know. And it really highlights the necessity that the Republicans have of confirming Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. You need to have that 9th Supreme Court justice there, because as we saw in 2000, this could very well be decided in the Supreme Court. That's how potentially close this election is. And fraud in a city like Philadelphia can really be determinative in terms of how the state of Pennsylvania goes. And, you know, we see the possibility, as Frank mentioned, of some unexpected states coming into play. To me, in New York is a possibility. It may be a remote possibility, but there are a lot of fed up New Yorkers. And as we said before on the show, upstate New York is largely Republican. And so the Democratic dominance comes in one city, in New York City. And there are a lot of fed up New Yorkers that are fed up with the reaction to COVID and being locked down. that may surprise a lot of people in terms of how they vote on November 3rd.
Okay, 30 seconds each, hot buttons, and then we're going to do chapter 6. Frank, go.
Going outside the box here for a few seconds from the election, President Xi Jinping gave a speech to his country's Marine Corps saying to prepare for war and to prepare for the very near future. Things are getting very serious in China, whether it's an attack on Taiwan or something even larger than that. Keep your eye on China. This is serious.
Okay, Ben, your hot button topic.
Guy named David Daleiden is an undercover reporter who did work exposing Planned Parenthood and their sale of baby parts, baby anatomy parts in California. He was targeted by Planned Parenthood in conjunction with Kamala Harris. There were secret meetings held between Planned Parenthood executives and Kamala Harris when she was the Attorney General there. And the result, a search warrant targeting him personally and seizing all of his video equipment and records. Just unbelievable Nazi state type of tactics used by Kamala Harris.
All right, we've got to take our final time out here on the program. Thank you so much for joining us. Go over to YouTube and check out, I guess it would be premium content for a WBV Inside the News. We're going to continue our conversation. It is a must-watch part of the show. We're going to see you again next week on another edition of Inside the News.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.